The Galactic Council chamber shimmered with cold light, crystalline walls reflecting the pride of empires that had conquered hundreds of worlds. Holograms of Earth's terrain hovered above the council table. Rolling oceans, jagged mountains, dense forests, and an emerald expanse labeled Amazon Basin. To the generals seated in their ceremonial armor, it looked more like a zoo than a battlefield. General Vakun of the Celt Dominion tapped a clawed finger against the image, his mandibles clicking with disdain. Primitive. Trees and rivers, no fortresses, no orbital platforms. Their armies still rely on ballistic weapons. When we land, it will be over in hours. Laughter rippled across the chamber, guttural and harsh, echoing through the crystalline dome. One by one, commanders traded boasts of how swiftly Earth's resistance would collapse. They spoke of jungles as if they were a joke, an inconvenience fit only for feral beasts. None of them had walked in soil that swallowed footsteps whole. None had breathed air thick enough to choke a machine. Their confidence, born of conquests across barren moons and desert planets, had no precedent for Earth's wilderness. What they dismissed as primitive was, in truth, a labyrinth designed by nature to punish arrogance. When the invasion fleet pierced Earth's skies, billions watched through trembling broadcasts. Fire streaked across the heavens, alien carriers blotting out constellations. Panic surged through cities, but deep within military command bunkers, a different silence prevailed, measured, grim, purposeful. Orders passed not through speeches but through curt acknowledgments, coded transmissions, and the narrowing of eyes that had already seen impossible wars. Earth's political leaders debated surrender, yet the soldiers tasked with defense understood something the aliens did not: a jungle was no passive ground. It was an ally waiting to be awakened. The landing came at dawn. Columns of armored transports descended into the Amazon Basin, crushing trees beneath repulsor fields, burning foliage with cleansing beams. Alien infantry poured out in perfect formation, exosuits gleaming with energy shields. To their optics, the forest was little more than a smee of heat signatures and lead humidity, a backdrop against which no enemy could hide for long. "Let them come," one commander barked. "We will flush them out as we've done on 100 worlds." His soldiers roared approval, rifles held aloft. The jungle answered not with roars, but with silence. Insects hushed, birds vanished into canopy shadows, and the damp air thickened with an almost conscious weight. Every alien footfall splashed in mud, every breath hissed through filters clogged by spores. They marched deeper, confident the enemy would break first. They had not noticed the faint glint of eyes watching from the tree line. Captain Elias Reyes crouched low in a nest of vines, sweat tracing lines across his dirt-smeared face. A veteran of a dozen Black Ops campaigns, he breathed in rhythm with the forest, his body blending into shadow and leaf. Around him, the men and women of his unit waited, 30 soldiers, each trained in the unforgiving crucible of jungle warfare. They carried no banners, no insignia beyond the dull patches on their shoulders. They were not there to meet the invaders in open battle. They were there to make them bleed until the thought of Earth's wilderness conjured nightmares in alien minds. Beside Reyes knelt Aileen, a tracker whose lineage stretched back to tribes that had lived and hunted in these lands long before nations drew borders. She traced the alien bootprints pressed into the soil, her fingers brushing mud as though reading a book only she could understand. Heavy, unfamiliar with ground. "They sink too deep," she whispered, her voice a thread of sound. Reyes gave a single nod, his eyes narrowing. The forest had already begun its work. Behind them, Sergeant O'Malley checked detonators strapped across his vest, his grin sharp despite the oppressive heat. "They are walking coffins," he muttered. "Just don't know it yet." His tone carried no arrogance, only a soldier's certainty that terrain could be a weapon sharper than any blade. The unit remained still as shadows until Reyes raised 2 fingers. No shots were fired, no blades unsheathed. Instead, they melted back into the undergrowth, invisible and waiting. The aliens believed themselves hunters, but the humans had chosen the battlefield with surgical care. Every vine was a snare, every pool a trap, every whisper of wind a cover for movement. Hours later, alien patrols reported no contact, only interference, comms riddled with static, scanners clouded by inexplicable distortions. Their commanders dismissed it as atmospheric anomaly. Yet as night began to fall, an unease grew. Helmets fogged from humidity, armor joints clogged with grit, and the endless chitter of unseen creatures gnawed at discipline. Their jokes about primitive wilderness faded, replaced by a grinding silence broken only by the sound of their own restless breathing. Far above, orbiting warships tracked troop movements, their commanders growing impatient at the lack of progress. Reports spoke of jungles swallowing equipment, of soldiers losing their footing in mud, of casualties not from enemy fire, but from the wilderness itself. The council had mocked Earth for being untamed. Now, whispers circulated that perhaps they had chosen the wrong terrain to test human resolve. On the forest floor, Reyes signaled his team to halt. He studied the alien columns through the green glow of night optics. Numbers mattered little here. Armored legions meant nothing when every shadow could hide a knife, when every sound might be a warning too late to heed. He whispered into his comm, his voice carrying the quiet conviction of a man who knew both the cost and the necessity of war. The jungle is ours. They've already lost. The words rippled through the unit, settling in each heart like a vow. They did not cheer, nor smile. They simply vanished once more into the green inferno, where patience was the deadliest weapon of all. The aliens marched on, unaware that the war they thought had not yet begun was already devouring them. And in that silent, suffocating dusk, the conflict sharpened into clarity. One side armed with machines, the other armed with the will of a wilderness no empire had ever tamed. Dawn broke in fractured beams through the canopy, pale gold light swallowed by leaves before it touched the ground. The alien vanguard stood in weary silence, armor slick with condensation that refused to dry. Their boots sank into mud that clutched and pulled, each step heavier than the last. General Vakun's field commander barked orders for discipline, but the sharpness in his tone betrayed unease. They had marched only a few kilometers into the jungle, yet already their formations sagged, energy cells depleted faster than predicted, medical logs filled with cases of fever, rashes, and fungal infections. Soldiers who had faced plasma storms and radiation winds now scratched at unseen bites, their suits no barrier against insects small enough to crawl through every seam. The air itself fought them. Humidity fogged their visors, optics blurred into green smears, and sensors hissed with static. Drones released to scout ahead crashed into branches or vanished without signal. Every direction looked the same. Towering trunks wrapped in vines, pools of water reflecting broken patches of sky, shadows shifting where no wind stirred. What had seemed a trivial wilderness now pressed against them with suffocating indifference, and indifference was worse than hostility. A hostile foe could be fought. The jungle ignored them as it consumed. From the shadows, Captain Reyes and his team observed. Camouflage paint mixed with mud streaked their faces until their eyes alone betrayed humanity. They moved with the forest rather than through it, careful steps leaving no sound, no trail. Reyes kept his voice low, a whisper barely audible to his squad yet sharp as a blade. They are disoriented. We don't push. We bleed them slow. His tone carried no doubt. Time and terrain were allies that required no reinforcements. Aileen crouched near a stream, her gaze fixed on the rippling water as a column of aliens stumbled across it. She marked how one of them slipped, the weight of armor dragging him knee-deep, his comrades hauling him out with curses. They are already weak, she murmured, her accent soft yet edged with certainty. She could read the jungle as easily as language, each disturbance telling her who faltered, who feared. Her ancestors had hunted here without rifles or satellites. Now she turned that same instinct against invaders who thought themselves untouchable. O'Malley crouched behind her, rolling a claymore mine between his palms as if it were a familiar toy. His humor had dulled since arrival, replaced by a soldier's predator calm. "Couple more days and they'll be begging their gods for mercy," he muttered. "And that's before we even start playing." His grin was sharp but humorless. Reyes gave him a look that carried the weight of restraint. Patience was the weapon, not bravado. As evening descended, the first strike came. Not a barrage of gunfire, but a whisper of steel across the dark. One alien patrol, separated from the main column, fell silent after 3 muffled cries. Their bodies were left where they fell, hidden under foliage. The survivors who searched for them found only broken branches and strange tracks leading nowhere. No alarms were raised. The commanders assumed deserters or accidents. Yet the soldiers who saw claw marks carved into armor swore the jungle itself had teeth. Night amplified fear. Sounds multiplied. Echoes of insects, guttural growls from unseen predators, the distant splash of water where something large moved. Human voices joined that chorus, disguised within the noise, a whistle that mimicked birdsong, a whisper that imitated rustling leaves, a distorted fragment slipping through alien comms. Soldiers fired into shadows, their rifles sparking arcs of light that illuminated nothing but trees. For every round spent, silence returned heavier, thicker, as if mocking them. The special forces moved like wraiths. They set snares from sharpened bamboo, tripwires woven into roots, mines hidden in shallow pools. They never stayed to watch their traps, only listened from a distance to the explosions or the screams that followed. Each loss eroded alien cohesion, and discipline cracked. An army designed for overwhelming force had never trained for enemies it could not see. At dawn, alien commanders counted dozens of missing troopers, no bodies recovered. Reports contradicted one another. Some swore humans struck from above, others claimed unseen beasts dragged soldiers into the dark. Vakuun's field commander silenced dissent with threats, but even his own eyes betrayed sleepless nights. Orders were issued for a broad sweep of the jungle. "We burn it out," he declared. "No hiding place will remain." From their vantage, Reyes listened to the booming announcement carried over alien comms. He turned to his squad, expression unreadable. "They are coming deeper," he said. "Exactly where we want them." His soldiers nodded, not with eagerness but with understanding. They knew what was at stake. The central conflict had sharpened. Alien arrogance armed with machines against human patience armed with wilderness. The aliens sought to conquer ground. The humans sought to transform ground into a weapon. One side counted numbers, the other measured silence. Aileen glanced at Reyes, her dark eyes reflecting fireflies flitting in the dim. "They think they will find us," she whispered. "But the jungle does not reveal what it wishes to keep hidden." Reyes allowed himself a rare, fleeting smile. "Then let's make sure it keeps us." The jungle settled again, vast and breathing, its silence filled not with peace but with promise. The invaders marched forward, blind to the truth closing around them. The war they believed simple had already turned into a hunt, and they were not the hunters. The jungle awoke with violence cloaked in stillness. Alien walkers moved in staggered formation, mechanical limbs snapping vines and crushing saplings underfoot. Behind them, infantry slogged forward, their armor dulled by grime, their once proud banners draped in moisture. Drone swarms buzzed overhead, heat scanners sweeping for human shapes that refused to appear. The sweep had begun, a massive push to scour the Amazon clean. Commanders barked through static-riddled comms, promising victory once the wilderness was burned into submission. Yet every step pulled them deeper into a maze that bent to no will but its own. Reyes lay prone in a nest of undergrowth, his rifle cradled against his shoulder. Through the scope he studied the alien column. Their formation was wide, but already gaps yawned where soldiers had fallen behind. The jungle was patient, and he had taught his squad to mirror that patience. "Wait until they are tired," he murmured. "Wait until they can't see each other." His voice was low, even, stripped of emotion. War had taught him the virtue of silence more than any prayer. Aileen crouched nearby, her bow strung with a fiber cord that glistened faintly with oil. Though armed with a rifle, she favored the bow in terrain where sound could betray everything. Her eyes tracked the aliens as a hunter tracks wounded prey. "They carry too much," she said softly. "The weight slows them. They fight their own bodies." Her words were not pity, only observation. She had lived among the jungle's rules since childhood. She knew excess was death. O'Malley pressed a detonator into Reyes's palm, his grin tight, controlled. "Charges are set along the ridge. Tripwires buried under the muck. When they hit that line, it'll be hell." He glanced at the enemy walkers with a kind of soldier's admiration. Ugly bastards, though. Got to admit, they are built tough. Reyes returned the detonator. "Everything sinks if you drag it far enough into the swamp." O'Malley's grin widened. The aliens advanced, flamethrowers belching gouts of fire that crackled through underbrush. Trees toppled, smoke churned into the air, yet each burned patch revealed only more layers of jungle waiting behind. The soldiers coughed in the haze, vision blurred, comms flickering. When they stumbled into the first kill zone, Reyes exhaled slowly. "Now." Explosions tore through the formation. Fire and mud sprayed skyward, swallowing entire squads in concussive blasts. Walkers staggered, one toppling into a sinkhole where concealed charges shredded its hull. Alien screams pierced the smoke as confusion rippled outward. Reyes's squad moved instantly, short bursts of fire, arrows whispering through haze, knives striking when shadows allowed. They killed quickly, cleanly, vanishing before return fire could fix them. The aliens fired wildly, their rifles cutting down trees, tearing holes into the canopy, yet hitting nothing human. Panic took root where discipline should have held. Commanders shouted to hold formation, but fear hollowed their orders. Every step forward seemed to lead into more traps, more silence broken by sudden death. The sweep had turned into a retreat disguised as progress. Among the chaos, Reyes's squad captured an alien officer. O'Malley and 2 others dragged the struggling figure into the cover of vines, silencing its protests with a gag. They bound it fast, armor stripped away, until its 4 eyes flickered with raw terror. Reyes crouched before the captive, studying its trembling mandibles. "You thought this would be simple," he said quietly. "You thought a jungle was only trees. Look around. It doesn't obey you." The officer spat in defiance, but its words lacked conviction. Sweat beaded across its chitinous skin, its breathing shallow. When Aileen leaned close, pressing the edge of her knife against its throat, the alien's composure collapsed. "It hunts us," it whispered. "The shadows, they move." The fear in its voice was not of human steel, but of the jungle itself, as though the entire forest had become a single predator. Reyes rose, leaving the alien trembling in silence. He looked at his squad, his face unreadable. "They are breaking," he said. "Not because of what we've done, but because of what they think we are. That's enough." He did not need to explain further. Fear was a weapon sharper than bullets, and it weighed heavier with every step the invaders took. By nightfall, the sweep had collapsed into scattered pockets of exhausted soldiers clinging to whatever ground they thought safe. Fires burned in futile circles meant to ward off unseen hunters. Sleep came in ragged fragments, haunted by imagined footsteps and whispers that belonged to no human throat. Insects swarmed relentlessly, biting through gaps in armor. Some soldiers stripped their helmets in desperation, gasping for unfiltered air, only to breathe spores that choked their lungs. Reyes watched from a distance, his squad hidden above in the canopy. The alien camp was a wound of light in the endless dark, flickering, fragile. "They'll pull back soon," he said, voice barely audible over the chorus of insects. "And when they do, we'll push harder. They are prey now. They just don't know how to live as prey." His words settled like a commandment, each soldier absorbing them as truth. Ayelin's gaze lingered on the terrified officer bound beneath the roots of a saber tree. She whispered something in her native tongue, a prayer or perhaps a warning, before turning back to her comrades. The jungle rustled softly around them, indifferent, eternal. Far above, orbiting ships received broken transmissions, requests for reinforcements, pleas for medevac, fragmented reports of enemies invisible and unrelenting. The commanders dismissed them as exaggerations born of fatigue. They had not walked in the green inferno. They could not understand how quickly arrogance curdled into dread. The humans did not cheer their victories. They only prepared for the next step, sharpening their knives, cleaning their rifles, waiting. Reyes whispered into the darkness, more to the jungle than to his men. "They wanted a war. We'll give them one they'll never forget." The night swallowed his words, carrying them deeper into the forest, where the boundaries between man and wilderness blurred until they were the same. The hunt was not over. It had only just begun. The swamp lay ahead like a black mirror, its surface broken by reeds and islands of muck. Alien commanders believed it a final stronghold, the one place they could corner the elusive human forces. Orders came from orbit: push through, secure ground, and crush resistance in a single decisive strike. Walkers lumbered into the mire first, heavy machines groaning as their legs churned water into froth. Infantry followed, trudging chest-deep in sludge, rifles raised above their heads. Overhead, drones scanned relentlessly, beams cutting across the canopy. Yet the jungle gave them no answers, only distorted echoes. From the shadows, Reyes waited. His squad lay hidden along the ridges, faces painted with mud until skin and bark became one. He studied the advancing army, his expression calm though his pulse thundered in his ears. "This is the line," he whispered into his comm. "Once they are in, we close the trap." His voice carried no triumph, only resolve. He knew the cost of war, but he also knew the weight of surrender. Behind his calm exterior lay the knowledge that Earth would not survive another humiliation. O'Malley's hands twitched over the detonator, a soldier's impatience bubbling against discipline. "Whole platoons waist-deep and blind," he muttered. "You give the word, Captain, and I'll sink the lot of them." His grin flashed, quick and sharp. Reyes gave a slight nod, but not yet. Patience was still the sharpest edge. Aileen moved silently through the brush, her bow across her shoulder. She placed a hand against the damp earth, eyes half closed as though listening to the swamp itself. "They do not belong here," she whispered. "The ground rejects them. It waits for us." Her certainty steadied the squad as much as Reyes's commands. To her, the forest was not backdrop but ally, a living force that had already chosen sides. The aliens advanced deeper. Mud dragged at their legs, walkers sank to their armored knees, and panic whispered through the ranks. Reyes raised 2 fingers. Explosions rippled outward in a chain, detonations timed with precision. The swamp erupted in chaos. Water churned into geysers, walkers toppled into sucking pits, their engines shrieking as circuitry drowned. Infantry screamed as shockwaves tore formations apart, bodies swallowed by Maya before comrades could reach them. From the ridges, the humans struck. Rifle fire lanced from shadows, sharp and surgical. Arrows whispered through smoke, finding gaps in armor. Mines triggered under retreating squads, cutting escape routes into fire and ruin. The aliens fired back in desperation, their energy bolts scorching trees, but the humans were never where they aimed. Each shot seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Reyes moved among his squad, not with shouts but with gestures, each motion precise as a blade. They advanced into the smoke, closing distance. The time for shadows had passed. Now came the knife. O'Malley hurled charges into clusters of soldiers, explosions painting the swamp in arcs of flame. Ayelin's bow sang, her arrows striking throats and joints with unerring accuracy. Reyes fought hand to hand, his blade driving between chinks of alien armor, his movements economical and merciless. Alien morale fractured. Soldiers abandoned formations, clawing through mud in blind retreat. Commanders tried to rally them, their orders drowned by screams and static. When a final walker toppled sideways into the swamp, its bulk dragging squads beneath the surface, the rout began. Reyes seized the moment. "Push," he roared, his voice the first true shout of the campaign. His squad surged forward, pressing the assault with a fury born not of vengeance but of necessity. Each strike carried the weight of Earth's survival. The captured alien officer, bound days before, watched from the shadows where the squad had tethered him. His eyes widened at the spectacle of his comrades drowning and burning, and for the first time he understood. The humans did not fight the jungle. They became it. The wilderness had found its instrument in them. As the last pockets of resistance collapsed, survivors signaled frantically for evacuation. Orbiting ships broke silence with hurried retrieval orders, descending beams of light that dragged broken soldiers skyward. No victory was declared. The fleet withdrew not with conquest but with humiliation, their forces shattered by an enemy they had dismissed as primitive. Reyes stood on the ridge, watching the retreat through drifting smoke. His chest heaved, his uniform soaked with sweat and blood, yet his eyes held no celebration. War had never been cause for joy. O'Malley approached, his grin faint but steady. "That'll teach him not to laugh at our backyard." Reyes gave no reply, only a long look into the swamp where wreckage smoldered. Aileen joined them, her bow across her shoulder, her gaze solemn. "They will tell stories," she said. "Not of victory, but of fate. The jungle ghosts will follow them." Night settled slowly, the jungle resuming its chorus as though nothing had happened. Crickets sang, frogs called, leaves rustled with unseen life. The battlefield dissolved into the same timeless rhythm it had held long before fleets and armies arrived. Humanity had not defended Earth with machines or numbers, but with endurance, cunning, and the patience to let arrogance destroy itself. Reyes finally broke the silence, his voice low but carrying weight. "They mocked the wilderness. Now they'll remember it. And when they come again, they'll know what waits for them." His soldiers listened, the words sinking deeper than any victory cheer. They had survived not by overpowering their enemy, but by becoming something greater, predators in a forest no empire could tame. Above them, the stars glittered coldly, the retreating ships vanishing into their vast silence. On those distant worlds, whispers would spread of Earth's defenders, men and women who fought as shadows, striking from a jungle that devoured armies. The galaxy would come to know them by many names, phantoms, specters, hunters. But among themselves, they needed no titles. They were simply human. And in that truth lay the reason no empire would ever conquer them. The weeks after the retreat were filled with uneasy silence. The jungle bore no scars from the conflict. Its wounds closed as quickly as they had been cut, roots swallowing wreckage, vines climbing over shattered armor until metal seemed like part of the earth itself. For those who had fought, the quiet was stranger than battle. The Special Forces unit moved through the basin as if still hunted, each step measured, each watchful glance searching shadows that now held only animals. Victory had been declared by the world above, yet to Reyes and his team, it did not feel complete. The Council had not surrendered. They had pulled back, licked their wounds, and carried their shame away into the stars. But shame does not fade, it festers. The squad knew this truth even before the first intercepted transmission confirmed it. The invaders had not abandoned Earth entirely. They were regrouping, preparing, reshaping their tactics around the bitter lessons they had learned. Reyes studied the data on a cracked tablet, the light from its screen painting the lines of exhaustion carved into his face. "They'll return," he said, voice firm though his body sagged from fatigue. "Next time they'll come smarter. They'll know the jungle is not their ally. They'll adapt, just as we did." He closed the device and looked at his soldiers, meeting each gaze in turn. "And we'll be ready." O'Malley leaned back against a tree trunk, detonator still clipped to his vest as if refusing to part with it. "Let 'em come," he said, though his tone lacked the humor he usually laced into every word. "We gave 'em a lesson in hell, and if they are stupid enough to want more, then I'll be the teacher again." His grin flickered, but his eyes betrayed the weight of too many nights without sleep. Aileen sat cross-legged near the fire, her bow across her knees, her expression serene yet distant. She listened more than she spoke, her thoughts tuned to rhythms no machine could measure. When she finally lifted her gaze, it was not to Reyes but to the canopy overhead. "They will return with machines that bane wider paths, weapons that kill from farther away," she said softly. "But the forest is older than their machines. It does not run, it waits." Her certainty was not comfort, but it was strength, and the squad leaned on it like roots pressing into soil. The central conflict no longer lay in the alien arrogance alone, but in the endurance of the soldiers who had defied it. They were few, each life sharpened into a blade against a force that measured armies by the tens of thousands. The galaxy did not believe a handful of humans could shift the balance of empire, but Reyes knew better. History had always been written by the patient and the relentless, not by the loudest conquerors. New orders came from Earth Command, cloaked in urgency. The squad was to remain in the basin, to establish permanent outposts along the rivers, to prepare for incursions. Supplies were scarce, reinforcements thinner still, but the jungle itself supplied more than food and water. It supplied cover, concealment, and the constant reminder that survival belonged to those who adapted quickest. The squad accepted their orders without complaint, though none were blind to what it meant. They were not only soldiers now, they were the first wall between Earth and an empire that had begun to take them seriously. At night, Reyes walked the perimeter, listening to the frogs call and the branches creak. He thought of the officer they had captured, the way its defiance had cracked into fear. That fear would travel back across the stars. It would fester in boardrooms and war councils, whispered by soldiers who had lived the nightmare. But fear could be conquered, and empires rarely accepted humiliation without blood in return. By the second week, signs appeared. Ash floated on humid breezes where no fire had been set. Animals scattered days before the squad heard engines. New satellites, unseen but felt in the distortion of comms, hung like silent predators above the clouds. Reyes gathered his team one evening, his voice hard with the weight of truth. "They are watching. They are mapping the ground. When they come back, it won't be to march blindly. They'll come with eyes everywhere. We'll need to change too. The squad absorbed his words in silence. For O'Malley, it meant more traps, more clever toys rigged from scraps. For Eileen, it meant deeper communion with the forest, learning which paths even machines could not cut. For Reyes, it meant shouldering the knowledge that the war was not won, it had only paused. Their victory was a spark. Whether it burned into fire or died into ash depended on what came next. That night, rain lashed the canopy, thunder rolling like drums of war. The squad huddled beneath tops, their fires smothered, their gear slick and heavy. Yet no one complained. Instead, they sharpened blades, oiled rifles, checked traps. In the thunder's rhythm, each found a different resolve. Eileen whispered to herself in her native tongue. O'Malley hummed a half-forgotten soldier's tune, and Reyes stared into the dark, already planning for the day the jungle would no longer be enough to hide them. The forest slept and woke as it always had, indifferent to human fears. But in the hearts of those who guarded it, a new edge had been honed. They had tasted the measure of an empire and drawn blood. Now the question that lingered, heavier than the storm, was simple. When the invaders returned, would Earth's defenders stand once more as hunters, or be hunted themselves? The rain eased. Dawn crept over the treetops in muted gold. Reyes rose, water dripping from his gear, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the sky met the jungle's endless green. "It's not finished," he said, almost to himself, though his squad heard him. "Not by a long shot." And with those words, the silence that followed was not peace but a pause before the storm, a breath before the next descent into the unforgiving heart of survival. The jungle had grown quieter than usual, its symphony of insects and birds dulled, as if the forest itself sensed a coming disturbance. Reyes noticed it first, standing at the edge of a ridge line where the trees bent toward the valley. The silence was wrong. The forest did not simply hush without reason. He raised his hand, halting the patrol, and the squad melted into cover with practiced efficiency. Moments later, a low hum drifted over the canopy, mechanical and alien. Not the roar of dropships nor the heavy thunder of artillery craft, but something subtler, colder, recon drones sweeping vast swaths of wilderness with precision far beyond the clumsy attempts of the first invasion. Reyes' jaw tightened. The Empire had returned, and they had adapted. O'Malley crouched beside him, scanning the skies through binoculars. "Smaller, faster. They are learning," he muttered, his usual humor stripped to a steel edge. "Those things aren't blind. They'll smell us out sooner or later." Ayala's eyes flicked upward, her hand resting lightly on the curve of her bow. "The forest will not stop them this time. It will have to strike with us." Her words were not poetic for their own sake, they were strategy. She had spent weeks walking deeper into the basin than even Reyes dared, learning how the vines concealed pitfalls, how roots masked old river channels, how the animals scattered before foreign scents. She spoke now as someone who had taken the jungle into herself as an ally. Reyes nodded. "Then we make them overconfident. Let them think they see everything, until the moment they see nothing at all." The squad scattered, each member vanishing into the labyrinth of green. They moved like shadows, setting false trails, rigging broken armor with heat signatures to low scanners, and marking fresh paths that led to deadfalls and choke points. The jungle, which had once seemed chaotic, now lay like a map across their minds. Every vine could be a snare. Every pond could be a grave. But the enemy was no longer the same. Days later, the first clash proved it. A patrol of armored infantry descended along the river, their formation tight, their movements disciplined. The soldiers carried flamethrowers and sensor packs, burning back undergrowth, forcing the forest to scream as it blackened. Where the jungle had once cloaked the squad, fire sought to strip it bare. The ambush was swift and brutal. O'Malley's charges detonated beneath the lead soldiers, blasting two into the current. Ayala's arrows struck from impossible angles, silent and merciless. Reyes fired only when their panic scattered them into his line of sight. Within minutes, the survivors fled upriver, leaving the water red and the trees smoking. Yet the victory rang hollow. The enemy had tested the forest, and though beaten back, they had proven the ground could bleed. That night, as smoke drifted through the canopy, the squad sat together, their silence heavy. O'Malley wiped soot from his face with a rag, muttering, "Next time they'll bring bigger torches. Maybe strip the whole basin clean." Reyes leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, the firelight carving deep shadows across his features. Then we don't just defend the jungle. We carry the fight beyond it. If they think the forest is all we have, we make them pay for every step outside it too. Rivers, cliffs, caves, this land is a weapon, every part of it. Ayelan's gaze lingered on him. But you know it will cost us. To strike outward is to risk losing the forest altogether. Reyes did not flinch. If we stay still, they burn it from under us. If we move, we bleed them until they question why they came back at all. Those are the choices. The decision hung in the air, like the storm brewing beyond the treetops. Each soldier felt the weight, but none opposed him. They were warriors of a dying breed, raised to believe that survival was earned through defiance, not waiting. The days that followed blurred into a relentless rhythm of strikes and withdrawals. The squad became phantoms, striking convoys on narrow ridges, collapsing bridges with timed blasts, vanishing into caves before orbital eyes could track them. The Empire's soldiers cursed them as demons, their reports riddled with confusion and dread. For every adjustment the invaders made, the humans found another crack to exploit. Yet the strain showed. Supplies dwindled, and fatigue gnawed at them like hunger. Ayelan's arrows grew fewer. O'Malley's explosives were cobbled together from scraps, each detonation a gamble. Reyes carried wounds that would not heal properly in the damp. Still, they pressed forward, knowing the battle was no longer just survival, it was a message. Every skirmish shouted across the stars that Earth was not a world to be conquered. One evening, after a raid that left a supply depot smoldering, Reyes stood apart from the others, his silhouette black against the firelight. He looked toward the horizon, where the jungle thinned into mountains, his thoughts heavy. Ayelan approached quietly, her steps as soft as the night air. "You carry too much," she said. Reyes shook his head. "I carry only what we all must. If we break, Earth breaks." Her hand brushed his arm, grounding him. "Then we do not break." Her certainty struck him deeper than any speech could. He nodded once, not in agreement, but in resolve renewed. The war was far from over, but the flame in their defiance still burned, refusing to be extinguished. The jungle stirred as if listening, the rustle of leaves carrying secrets to the dark. In that moment, the squad was not just a handful of soldiers. They were the pulse of a world fighting to live free, each heartbeat echoing a promise. The Empire would bleed for every inch it tried to claim. And as the night deepened, the silence returned, not the uneasy hush of fear, but the calm before another storm, the kind that gathers unseen until it crashes with fury. Reyes closed his eyes for a moment, hearing the rhythm of the forest align with the rhythm of his heart. Tomorrow, the enemy would come again. Tomorrow, they would answer. The story was not ending. It was sharpening, like a blade whetted on stone, waiting for the moment to strike deeper than ever before.